Hi, everyone, and welcome to Spilling the Beads, Coffee and Conversation with Patient Advocates. I am Sarah, and I'm a moderator with Summer Consulting, and I will be your host for today's episode, Turning Science into Action. I'm very thrilled to be here today and joined by some incredible advocates, and we appreciate your time so much. We are speaking with advocates behind the campaign of U equals U, which is Undetectable equals Untransmittable, a powerful community-driven campaign that changed the conversation around HIV. We have Brady, Cedric, and Daniel. I would love for each of you to take a minute just to introduce yourselves, share your name. If you're comfortable, tell us where you're calling in from, and also share your social media handle, how long you've been a patient advocate, and most importantly, what is the hot drink that you have in your cup today while we chat?
Thank you so much, Sarah. Hi, everyone. My name is Brady Etzkorn-Morris, and I live in Nashville, Tennessee. My social handle, you can find me at Brady Dale 311. I have been a patient advocate since 2016, and today I am having a Midnight Mama French roast in my Serenity Prayer mug because it reminds me every day of my recovery, because without my recovery, I would not have anything else in my life. On to you, Daniel.
Hello, everybody. Sarah, hi. Thank you for having us. I am Daniel G. Garza out of Laguna Beach, California. I have been an advocate living with HIV since 2001, diagnosed in 2000, so I'm about to celebrate 25 years of living with HIV. So it's a very exciting year for me this year. A lot of big celebrations. I'm also having the Midnight Mama blend, only because I'm a former smoker and I saw tobacco on there and I was like, that is the closest I'm going to get to tobacco ever again. Brady's talking about cups. This is the Christian and Daniel Show, which is the show that me and my partner do every Wednesday nights on YouTube. That's me. Hi, Cedric.
Hey team, how's everyone doing? I'm Cedric Pulliam out of Atlanta, Georgia. I've been a patient advocate for a long time. I believe my first public health and HIV advocacy role started when I was volunteering in 2009 in North Carolina. And my hot beverage is actually brewing, but it's going to be a great cup of ginger tea.
Thank you so much for taking that time. And I'm so jealous. I only have water in my cup today, but hot sounds really good right now. So before we get started and really get into some of this, I want to do a quick reminder just for everybody that this conversation is just for informational purposes only. Nothing shared between us is to be considered medical advice. We're not promoting any products or manufacturers, and we encourage you to speak with your physician before trying anything new. That said, we do encourage you to talk about your own personal experiences, and if there's anything within that, feel free to share with us and the rest of the audience too. All right, so let's jump in. I would love to go back to sort of the roots of U equals U and hear about that. So Brady, what was the inspiration to start U equals U?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. So back in 2016, I was attending an HIV is Not a Crime conference in Huntsville, Alabama. And there was lots of discussions about people being prosecuted under HIV criminal statutes. And there was a man that stood up and said, why are we still prosecuting people for living with HIV when we know now that people can't transmit the virus if they're on treatment? I'd never heard this before. And I'm like, oh my God, this guy is going to get in so much trouble. Like, I can't believe that somebody would even state something so ludicrous. But he mentioned, this Partner One study, some other research studies. And I'm like, I've never heard any of this. But when I got home, I was able to look it up on my own. And I found out, oh my God, he wasn't making this up. This is true, and why haven't I heard about it? So I reached out to Bruce myself through social media and didn't really think I would get a response. And it began one of the greatest friendships of my life, getting to work with Bruce. But then finding out that, this is accurate. Those of us living with HIV, when we consistently take our medication, we cannot sexually transmit the virus. And for me, it took a minute because I didn't immediately understand some of the impacts. Like it was kind of like a wave of things, but I was just like, Bruce, people need to hear this. And so in the initial stages, what we did is we reached out to the researchers, the people who actually did the studies, and came up with the research. And, a lot of folks may feel intimidated to do that, but believe it or not, people who do research love to talk about the research. Who would have thought? And so working with the research community, the community advocates and the research community came together and wrote a consensus statement. And we put the consensus statement out there. And I remember in the early days, Bruce and I, we were like, no, I really hope we can get maybe 20 organizations, or hopefully someday we can hit 50 organizations in the US that will sign on and stand behind the U equals U statement and the U equals U message. And when I tell you, it was wildfire. First, it was like almost within, a couple of hours, it was 25 organizations that had signed on. Within 2 weeks, we had already hit 50. And then it started popping up around the world. And that is the power of social media and community. Those two came together, and even though it was Bruce that kind of like stirred the fire a little bit, it was community advocates that actually took those few sparks and turned it into a bonfire. And it is still continuing to burn now around the US, but we just need to increase that fire a little bit here in the US.
Thank you so much, Brady. That's so exciting to hear about the initial roots of it and how it happened. We have a couple of questions from patient advocates from the insiders too. And the first one is from Jerry, who is at Everyday Living Lupus. She asked, what were the first steps? So you talked about this, that you reached out to the researchers. And the second part of this question is, where did you turn for information and resources? So I'm curious, like, how did you find the researchers that had done these Partner One studies and the other studies? What was your outreach like?
Yeah, whenever news research and all comes out, there's usually like an article either in JAMA or JAMA, the Journal of American Medical Association, and they put out these papers, and these researchers, their names are right there listed with the research, or within that research. And many times their either social handles or their emails are also included in those releases. And that's how we got in contact, by just reading the report. And even too, what was really funny, there's a lot of big words and mumbo jumbo and things that I didn't understand, but I was able to reach out to the researcher, and I'm like, hey, I'm just a regular person living with HIV. Can you tell me, how does this apply to me? And I got an email back that they dumbed it down for me and explained to me how it would work and how it affects my life. So it was just getting over that initial fear that, no, I don't have a doctorate. I'm not, that well educated. I don't understand a lot of these terms and everything that everyone else is using. But just by reaching out, I really think the researchers got excited that somebody was actually paying attention to what they were doing and was curious about how research could be implemented into my everyday life.
Well, that kind of leads us into another question that one of our patient advocates had too. This is from John Reyes, and he is the Parkinson's runner, and wanted to know, when you were crafting the campaign, how did you specifically translate that complex research and clinical data into messaging that connected with your community? And you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I'm curious about the creative aspects too, and what the role was for that.
Well, and community played a vital role, because even in the beginning, it was undetectable equals uninfectious instead of untransmittable. But the word uninfectious, it didn't sit right with a lot of the community members. And just hearing the word infected and infectious, because we don't talk about, no one says that person's chlamydia infected or that person's gonorrhea infected, but we hear people say people are HIV infected. So the word infected it just doesn't work very well for the HIV community or those of us living with HIV. So we changed the message the second you became untransmittable. But so going to the community and saying, well, here's the overall message. How does it best resonate with you? And we got that a lot too at the very beginning from our having to be more culturally competent in the way that we were crafting the message. Because I was in rooms in the very beginning and folks are saying, well, I don't know if my community won't understand this, or my community isn't going to accept this. And at first I was thinking, like, why not? Like, y'all are smart too. But it wasn't so much the message, it was how it was being said, and it was how it was being presented. And one size doesn't fit all exactly. So having to realized my white privilege and realized where I was coming from and my understanding of the message, I really had to roll that back, and I became more cognizant of, you know, the micro pieces of the puzzle that I didn't have access to, but I'm so grateful for, because then individual communities began to craft the information in a way that made sense to their communities. So it wasn't just like one person coming up with one particular catchphrase or anything like that, but the communities themselves took the information and then found a way to that they could present it to their communities that would be understandable and that they could relate it and use it in practical uses in their everyday lives.
That's fantastic. I love to hear about this explosion of growth. I think it's great to hear about that part of it. I would like to talk a little bit more about growth too. And Cedric, I would like to pull over to you a little bit. How did you develop your strategy to expand U equals U? What was that like for you?
Yeah, so the expansion was very critical in sort of the historical trajectory of both the U equals U, like awareness from a domestic and global standpoint, but also was a lot of almost continual debacle around, if people were in support, against, or on the fence of U equals U. During this time frame, before I joined Prevention Access Campaign, I was still in the U.S. federal government working between State Department, CDC, and HHS throughout the years leading up to when I joined Prevention Access Campaign. A lot of what was going on at that juncture was during its growth period of the campaign was getting the US government to support the messaging around U equals U, and it was not an easy feat. Some of the individuals, like Brady mentioned, Bruce and Brady and other community advocates from the US standpoint, they stood up strong towards leaders at the CDC, leaders at HHS, HRSA, SAMHSA, all of the HHS federal agencies that work and support those living with HIV and HIV prevention work. And it was not easy. I want to be very clear that it was not easy whatsoever. But over time, with hearing lived experience, storytelling, and all of the other elements advocates brought to the table, the growth and the support eventually did come from the government. And CDC was that entity that finally gave the support and the backing of this important health messaging campaign. And it was astronomical when they did support it. Not only what Brady had mentioned around the global growth from the beginning, it like catapulted the amount of like support and growth. The moment there was support and there was messaging coming from the CDC, you would hear it everywhere. And I worked at the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, or PEPFAR at the time. And that was also like in our meeting rooms, in our calls with the different field teams. That was the buzz. It was, what are we doing around U equals U from this global HIV standpoint, and what can we be doing more around it? So during that phase, and it was around like a 4 to 5 year trajectory, a little after that 2016 benchmark, like 2017 going into 22, where it literally went from, here's some buzz to like the top of the top tier of, being one of the popular things on social media, like trending at a point during like World AIDS Day and things of that nature. Some of the awareness days, people utilizing U equals U on their social media profiles, those that openly share that they're living with HIV and thriving with HIV. So it was a pivotal thing to watch this campaign grow, and being at the table with other colleagues, hearing the negatives and hearing the positives or supporters, being able to be in that space was very different, because not going to lie, at first I was like, okay, there's a lot of different ramifications of this message. Let's hear all sides. Let's get everything out on the table, and let's understand one another, and let's come to a conclusion and mitigate a strategy that we can, support and proceed with. And that's how it worked. And it sounds a lot easier than what it really was. But over time, we got to a point where there was support across the federal government within the public health agencies. And that was how, it made it easier for community advocates from a US and a global perspective, those living with, those that support those who live and thrive with HIV prevention advocates and leaders. It was like the whole gambit of those in the HIV field that were strong supporters of this campaign and movement. It was a phenomenon to really watch, like, come to fruition, to be honest, Sarah.
So, in addition to the advocates that were coming on board with you, was there another role that you would consider that was really vital to growth, like marketing or legal or any other kind of role that really played a part in making this get to the CDC and get the support?
Absolutely. We go back to some of those key researchers of the partner study that would be in the forefront, be at press conferences or just support on webinars during our COVID timeframe. It was a lot of support from those who understand the kind of HIV and legal landscape. He provided that historical piece of it. HIV is not a crime in Alabama in 2016. And it was individuals in that legal kind of HIV criminalization and modernization space that also was like, okay, at first they were hesitant or not in support, and eventually they did support. And so there was a lot of like legal backgrounds or legal minds as well that finally came into support and said, well, from a legal standpoint, here's things that you need to be thinking of and being mindful of. Policy folks and policy groups and organizations from both a national, state, and global perspective were very critical as well, because then it's like, how do we adopt this a part of our health and HIV policy for our country or for, a state here in the United States? So it was a lot of conversations, a lot of different actors from like a legal, a policy, communications, public affairs and relations. It was so many people that had to be a part of this like bigger effort in order for it to be where it is today in 2025. So that's a really good question, but it was a lot of people in the pot making sure that things worked in order for the success of this campaign.
Was it, just briefly, was it usually them finding you, or would you seek out these other people that you kind of identified that you really needed support from?
It was a bit of both, to be honest. It was where we had identified clear alignment and support with like pharmaceutical companies like Aviv Healthcare or Gilead Sciences that really devote majority of their, like Aviv is fully just an HIV pharma company, where Gilead has a lot of HIV components around their therapeutic area focus. It was some of the government entity folks that also were clearly aligned in support. And it was people we did not have clear like alignment or relationships that did reach out and say, how do I become, or how can I support your endeavors with this from my perspective or my work or from my country? And so there was a big mix of both, to be honest.
And Sarah, if I could pop in, I would just want to add to what Cedric was saying there, like getting the pharmaceutical aspect of it on board. As an HIV advocate, it felt a little weird at the beginning, getting in bed with Big Pharma. It was this very strange bedfellow, but that was very important in the beginning to break down those barriers, because I know that when a lot of people are trying to look for or starting campaigns, we don't have money. And it was pharma that actually helped us give some of those beginning campaign or beginning funds for some of the programs and some of the messaging, initial messaging that went out. So just so that out there, I mean, it felt weird at first, and sometimes even still today, it feels a little weird. A lot of us, we're just community members, and we do not have a huge bankroll to be able to do all of this, to finance what needs to be financed, to even just do these kind of community conversations. So learning to be a little bit more comfortable in uncomfortable situations was also vital in the beginning to get that funding that we needed to be able to get the messaging out to more people.
Yeah, that's an important point to make about the money and kind of like where those partnerships can really become valuable in a different way too. Cedric, you mentioned it was sort of this wildfire things that would happen on a personal level on social media where people would start sharing on their own social media the U equals U, and that awareness really helped. Do you have any tips or lessons for advocates that are looking to grow their own campaigns online? Was there anything that you noticed that worked, whether it was intentional or not?
I think that it was very important around strategically thinking around a messaging toolkit, like giving at least guidance to the U equals U global campaign as a health communication tool, but also providing a toolkit of like, here's how you can do this from, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And this is how you can, message this to local or people who are making policy, like politicians or those who are trying to create the health policy. And eventually we, as a prevention access campaign, we were ensuring that we had a kind of global network of individuals and organizations and different leaders of organizations to be able to spread that messaging and spread that toolkit across both the domestic and global landscape. And it was very useful, at least for folks to understand, okay, this is how I can use U equals U across my own social media, or if I want to like, even if I'm like giving a speech, or even if I'm doing just regular storytelling from my lived experience perspectives, here's how I can use this. And I've gotten at least examples in front of me to be able to articulate it appropriately, even if it's historical or some of that research data that was discussed from the partner study and other elements. And so that was very useful. And it's something I recommend, even if it's short and sweet and to the point. At least if you're going to start some sort of like messaging campaign, give the community at least a starting point. Like explain it. What does it mean to you? How you can utilize it across social media or any other forms of, communication tools, but at least give them something to start with and not just guess. If you're creating something like this, I highly recommend creating some kind of summary toolkit that anyone could be able to utilize, no matter what level of education, etc., that they may have, but something very simple and user friendly.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about any pushback that you may have received, especially with the long-standing stigma around HIV, and just how you dealt with that pushback, and what were some of your methods to deal with it.
A lot of the pushback would just come in just regular emails, or it'd be support, then one day it'd be like, I don't support U equals U. It's a lot of just rage of stigma, a lot of stigma oriented comments that will come in. I feel that and I don't always like using the word resilient, but like we just honestly would keep the locomotive going regardless of the pushback. Because again, when this, as Brady mentioned around the history, when this was started, somebody stood up, like we know Bruce stood up around this, and then others were like, once they learned and they got the information they needed to be comfortable with this new messaging and this new tool, then they wanted to work towards this and be and advocate for this as well. And so we always have had pushback. And so the pushback even today continues. But I think the armor that we had was that this is grounded in factual scientific research and data. This is not something that was just made up and formulated in some back room. This was research that took years, that was factual data. There was no contestation around it. So that was our armor around pushback. Our strategy was like, we're always going to have naysayers and people that are opposing this, but we know the facts, and we know that it is important for people living with HIV and those who care and love them, that they are aware of this message and this data and this scientific information. And that was our motto and our goal.
And Daniel, I have a question for you. If you feel comfortable with it, would you mind talking a little bit sort of about what that was like for you, having your own internal pushback and kind of coming toward belief and trust?
Come proverbial Kool-Aid. I was not partaking. I was not a fan. I was one of those people that stood on the sidelines, very judgmental of the whole process, not believing a word. Pretty much like Brady, I reached out to Bruce and said, I think it was in a direct message, probably on Instagram. I want to believe you. Can you come on my talk show, on my podcast? And basically convince me that this is real, that this is not a phase, that we're not just feeding the older generation something to make them feel regular. I don't really like the word normal because who's normal nowadays? But just make me feel like a regular person. And I feel like in order to really like move the conversation forward, we need to slingshot a little bit and move forward just a couple of steps. And kind of like what you're asking, Sarah, is going back to when I was diagnosed in 2000, and this is in South Texas. And I know we all know demographics plays a big part in how information is put out, the verbiage that it's being used. And in my platforms as an educator, I always talk about the religious, the social norms, and the culture that you are in. It's the way that we will receive information or the way the information is being delivered to us. It doesn't go everywhere the same way. So picture it. September 2000, Texas. I'm newly diagnosed. There is no such thing as U equals U, obviously. It is all about the numbers. And I remember the fear of my numbers dropping. When I was diagnosed, I was 108 T cells and I weighed 110 pounds. And they were pretty much done with me. They were like, he's not going to make it. So when I did, it was that fear. You got to stay healthy. You got to keep your numbers up. That's the only way you're going to be like, have a regular life. And when you're on disability and that label's already on your head and the numbers are what's going to keep you alive, that's really the only thing you're concerned about. Relationships, sex, longevity. I was 29 when I was diagnosed. I never thought I was going to be 50 years old. I'm 54 now. And so here comes Bruce, Mr. Cutie Pie, talking about U equals U. And I'm like, yeah, you're good looking, but was what you're saying really going to matter? Like, does it really work? So he came on the show and one of my first questions was like, convince me that this is for me and anybody living with HIV longer than me. Convince me that we can have a regular relationship. Convince me that we can have sex again and feel safe. Convince me that everything that the doctors, that organizations, that other advocates told us was not a lie, but not really true. How many people, and in that slingshot, we find so many people who gave up on relationships, who gave up on sex, who never thought they would have a companion again. And all of a sudden, here we are going, but you can. The genie's been out of the bottle now. What's your wish? And it was hard being a Latino and having to talk to people about it. And I dare say with heavier dosage of culture, religion, and social norms, it was very difficult to say, indetectable es igual intransmisible. And they were like, no entiendo, ¿qué es eso? I don't understand, what's that? Having to educate myself. So it's been in my timeline as a human, U equals U has played a big part in not just learning, but how to educate my community about it.
Like Daniel said, that initial fear, it's such a huge motivator. For me, when I first heard about U equals U and it was presented to me as you can have sex without fear, I'm like, yeah, that was a great thing, but it wound up when I got home and it was kind of like, I just kept renumerating all of this in my head over and over. Like, I can't pass it on. I can't pass it on. For the very first time, like for me, it wasn't even about sex. It was mental health. U equals U for me gave me my life back because I was constantly thinking, here I am. I've acquired HIV. I'm a burden to my community. I'm a burden to my friends. I'm a burden to my family. So what do? I began isolating. But when I heard and accepted this science and this research and realized I cannot sexually transmit HIV, it really didn't even become so much about sex. It became about how much it improved my mental health. Because for the very first time since a doctor had walked into the room and said, Brady, you have AIDS, hearing about U equals U and learning that I'm not like walking around glowing in my community as like looking like I'm radioactive, for the very first time since that diagnosis, I was just Brady again. It wasn't Brady, the HIV positive guy or any of that. It was like, I'm just Brady. And then all kinds of things kind of steamrolled after that. After I realized I was just Brady again, I found sobriety. I've been sober since 2017. I was able to find love again, something that I thought I would, like Daniel alluded to, like I never thought I would have love again. But I'm about to celebrate my 6-year anniversary this year with my husband. I'm a homeowner now. There's all these other kind of things that came into, like, U equals U, yeah, it's about sex, but there are so many other ways that this messaging and this information, how it spills over into our lives in areas that we initially didn't even think about in the beginning days of crafting this message or anything. But it's things that I'm loving to see, because there are people who've been in relationships for over 20 years who never thought they could conceive a child or have a family, because for them, it was going to be this really huge, expensive medical intervention, sperm washing, all of this. But when you tell people that they can actually have babies and have families and not have to worry about not only not transmitting it to your partner, but not transmitting it on to your children, it changes lives. And again, like I said, it's not just about sex. The mental health aspect, like, I felt like it almost felt like the entire HIV community just went, it was like one of those type moments. And it's still, that type of thing is still reverberating within the community. And it's, it's not an overnight thing. It's a slow process, and you just can't give up on it. Some of it you have to let it play out on its own way, but just always knowing that at the end of the day, like Cedric said, we are standing in truth. Like, everything that we are saying is based in scientific fact and data, and that, to me, was always my armor as well. We talked about armor earlier. That was my armor. It's the science. It's not Brady saying this. It's not Bruce saying this. It's not Daniel or Cedric saying this. It is the science and the data saying this. And that really also, help bring more people into the loop and into the fold.
Thank you. Cedric, I have a little bit of a follow-up based on kind of what Brady was talking about too. I'm curious, I know that the impact, either personal or global, was probably a lot different, or maybe it wasn't, but maybe it was different than what you were expecting when you first started this and the goals that you had when you were doing this. Are there any other ways that you can think that this has surpassed your original goals?
Absolutely. I would say getting to be able to achieve a country adopting U equals U into their actual health policy and indoctrinating it into their like everyday public health practitioners, doctors, clinicians, nurses, like this is their guiding factor for those living with HIV that they're treating or, doing checkup appointments and follow-up appointments. These are like countries like the Vietnam example, working alongside the team to really navigate that was one of the most like amazing career moments of my professional career, to see the ministerial level meetings and the conversations, the very early or very late calls with the Vietnamese colleagues at CDC Vietnam. And this work had started before I joined the Prevention Access Campaign team, but being able to live it out to see what ensued in Brisbane, Australia during IES in 2023 was the best moment of my career. And to see that a country will adopt this message into indoctrination policy and to ensure that their health system abides by that policy of U equals U was the best of the best when it comes to success for this work.
Daniel, I'm curious, as U equals U continues to spread globally, and like in that example, what actionable steps do you plan to take to keep this momentum going as it grows?
Sure. So steps that I think to continue on, and obviously we can't not talk about our current situation politically and funding and the way that it's affecting everybody across the board. I stand on HIV, cancer, and mental health. And across the board, we're all losing funding and programs are being cut, research is being limited. And to sit here and have this opportunity and not bring it up would be very fill in the blank. So when I accepted the title of advocate back in 2001, and somebody said, you're actually advocating or you're speaking for the community, the Latino community in South Texas, and then Houston, and then California, I took that very serious. I'm like, wow, somebody has actually bestowed beyond this title of speaker for a community that doesn't normally speak. And we see that now too. It's part of the political platform. We know it. So I think what I'm going to do is twice what I used to do before, because there's people that are being silenced. Back in 2012, I started a podcast, which is now a live stream, which then became my production company that me and my partner do the shows together, and I produce other shows. I participate and collaborate with whomever knocks on my door. If the message is positive and it's moving forward and it falls within what I talk about my platform, I'm there presenting English and Spanish. I've had the pleasure and I've been honored to be in Puerto Rico a couple of times. I was in Hawaii. I was in Anchorage. We went to Munich. And one of the most beautiful things is, particularly when it comes to U equals U, is to stand there and listen to people talk about U equals U in different countries and have them then teach you what U equals U and how to say it. And it's being a voice. I really, and I don't say that because we're here, and I've known Brady and Cedric for a while. The three of us, I mean, we stand with our voice. We are a walking megaphone for anything that affects us and that we know that will affect our community and that it affects people who do not have the voice to stand up and speak for themselves. And we know there's a lot of people, not because they can't, not because there's not a space for them, just that they're not the people that stand up front. They have an edit button, which we're missing that edit button sometimes. So it's taking the invitations like this one and having the insiders say, hey, we believe in your message. We watched you grow as an advocate. We want you on this panel. Can you share? And here we are. So, Indetectable, igual, intransmisible, U equals U. We're here to talk about it. I didn't mention earlier, but I am Daniel G. Garza is my Instagram handle. People have messaged me from around the world there. HIV Positive Life is my Facebook page. And I get messages from people around the world also asking like, hey, in this little tiny village in Africa, we heard about this. And I want to find a partner. I want to live my life. Can I? There's not letters big enough to say, yes, go be a regular person out in the world. Do not let HIV hold you back. And I think the three of us, I humbly say the three of us are proof that HIV has not held us back. In fact, again, talk about the slingshot, it just gave us ammunition to be stronger and bigger. So I, on camera, will say, not that there's an HIV advocacy oath, but let's start one right now. I promise Daniel G. Garza as an HIV advocate to continue to use my voice to deliver the messages so that people can live a regular life and not let HIV or any other disability hold them back.
Daniel, I have one other question for you. Looking back at everything that you've learned throughout this journey, is there anything that you wish you knew when you had gotten started?
There's something that I had known, two parts. Something that I had known in September of 2000 in Bentop Hospital in Houston, Texas, when the doctor said, you have AIDS, and they put that label on my forehead. If I knew now that it was somebody else's label on me, it was not a label that I chose. If I'd known then that it was going to hold me back from growing, I would have not accepted it. I would have said, no, I am not doing well right now, but I will come out of it. Just like I kicked out the priest out of my room when he came in to talk to me, I would have kicked out that label and said, no, I am not disabled. I am living with HIV. But we didn't know that then. And when it comes to U equals U, I think I would go back and be a little nicer to Bruce when he was first coming out with the information. So Bruce, if you're watching this, I love you now, but I wish I would have been a little more open with the information so that I could be more accepting. I think that my stubbornness, and we keep talking about the fear. I wish the fear hadn't been there, so I'd been more open to the information so that I could have gone to my community and said, hey, let's really look at this. And Brady brought up the facts and Cedric brought up the facts. Like, here are the facts. I really wish I would have jumped on board quicker and started doing those translations so that it would have been available in Spanish for my community. But we're here now, and we're doing the very best we can with whatever resources we have. So let's keep moving forward.
I would like to actually pose that same question to both you, Cedric and Brady, as well. Is there anything that you wish you would have known when you were getting started on this journey? And is there anything that you would tell yourself from those early days?
I'll start, and mine is very similar to Daniel. I'm a normal skeptic of things. Usually that is how I've always been, of just like asking the questions, being the devil's advocate. But I really feel that, in those rooms with other federal colleagues from the government perspective, that I would have, paused taking the time to go to read the research and understand partner one study results and all of the things that were being told, and also listening to community members more with lived experience and bringing them into the conversation. And what I would have told myself going back to 2016 is have an open heart, listen, and then, have the time to make the accurate decision on sort of where my personal opinion or my professional opinion from a federal government perspective at that time um would have with where we were at that point and my team at the State Department with PEPFAR. So that being said, I have learned a lot from this lesson. I have kept that even to this day in how I proceed with things. I do go back to the data. I do go back to the study and the facts before I make a decision. I call that informed decision making. But that was my lesson from all of this, is to realize and to learn and to understand and to grow from, back then in 2016.
And it's funny because I'm the exact opposite of the spectrum as Daniel and Cedric were in the beginning. I was so Pollyanna-ish and I was so naive. I was like, this is like really something great. And it's something very positive. It's something that brings in hope. I had hope again and all these other things. And I naively thought that everybody else was going to feel the same way. And I wished I had prepared myself a little bit more for the pushback and for those things and having to take off my rose-colored glasses and realizing that not everybody is at the same place of their diagnosis as I was. No one else has lived my life, so my life experience was playing into my current situation, unlike anybody else's lived experience. So I wish I would not have been so naive in the beginning, and I wished I would have prepared myself a little bit more. And also coming and learning to understand that even though we are all working within the HIV community, when we come to the table, even though it might be around HIV, everyone comes to the table with their own agendas. Learning how to accept that these are other important aspects. They're important spokes of the wheel, but realizing too that all those spokes are needed to make that wheel work. Because you take out one spoke and that wheel's going to break. I wish I just wouldn't have been so naive in the beginning, but it all worked out for me though.
Can I add something to that? I think the three of us, I mean, if you look at us, we're very different people. And I tend to always come back to the three things: social norms, culture, and religion, and where you are mentally, physically, and spiritually. And unfortunately, as people still are newly diagnosed, we need to look where they come from, how they think, and how they feel. And we just keep training the younger generations, whether they are living with HIV or not, because those are the voices. I'm 54 years old now, so it's not always easy to communicate to a 20-year-old how to take care of themselves, because I'm at the age where they're like, back in my day. So this is why something like this is so important, so that the younger generations can understand that things are changing, things are evolving, and we're not always the voice of reason. We might be a little outdated on our way we look at things. But that's why we need to continue to train the younger generations to carry the message. One day we won't be around, and we need somebody to carry. Hopefully, one day we won't have to be having these conversations anymore.
Before we close out, I would really love to hear what your deepest wish is for the community of people that are living with HIV.
Oh, well, I'll start in real quick. For me, my deepest wish is to not give up hope, to realize that hope is out there. Because I know that when I was first diagnosed with HIV, I immediately went to a dark place and spent several years there and am really surprised that I'm even alive today. But I really want the message of hope, that there is life after diagnosis. And not only is there life after diagnosis, but that you can thrive with this diagnosis, and that there are actually opportunities that are going to open up to you because of this diagnosis. You won't see them today. You may not see them a year from now. But for me, I have met some of the greatest salt of the earth people because of being diagnosed with HIV. I have got friendships with Cedric and Daniel that I can fall back upon. But for me, it would be the message of hope and that just because your life may have been interrupted with the diagnosis, your life is not over because of your diagnosis.
Thank you, Brady. That was beautiful and very in agreement with this work. Um, Bringing me to great people like yourselves, like you and Daniel, and so many others within the HIV community. You know, my wish for the HIV community is I want folks to continue thriving. This is a very hard time that we're living in currently right now on April 28th, 2025. It's a very hard time, but keep thriving, keep advocating, sharing. If you decide to share your story, that is a personal choice that you and only you should make. No one should make it for you, but if you are willing, share your story, share your lived experience. But it doesn't have to be what you do. I want people to understand you have the choice, but thrive. Thriving is so important. Live your life. Don't have restrictions around things. Get the house, get the new job, or go for whatever, even if it's, you know, you're in your 40s or 50s, say, you know, I do want that degree. Go get it. Do what you want to do in your life and know that there is a community of people that will listen to you, support you, and be by your side. A lot of us are just one click away of a DM or a comment or message or a text or call or FaceTime away. I want people to know, especially in this time, that I want you to thrive, continue to thrive.
Wow, good stuff. And I just realized we're BCD. To my fellows living with HIV, and for anybody watching this who is newly diagnosed, let's be honest. To hear those words sucks. It will affect you or has affected you mentally. It will affect you physically. Don't let it affect you spiritually. If anything I can say about my colleagues here is that we three and many others that I know have fought and walked and talked to make sure that we get treated with respect, that we have the dignity we deserve, and that people listen to us. And that's only because we believe in our spirit, and it's the last thing to fall because of resilience and because of hope. So when you feel tired, we're there for you. When you need to cry, we will cry with you. If you want tacos, give me a call. Above all, do not let anybody break your spirit. Your spirit is that little match in the room that lights up the darkness. And if you need anybody to talk to about it, we're here for you.
Oh, I want to give you the most heartfelt thank you. I really appreciate each one of you and all of you coming together as a team of advocates and sharing your stories and your wisdom with us and our audience today. If you're new to The Insiders, make sure you join our community at theinsiders.com, where you can get paid to share your healthcare stories, and be sure to follow us on socials. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.